out. Good evening, good evening, good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? Super excited tonight. Been waiting for this for a long time. I'm glad this is finally happening. We've been kind of kicking this around for a little bit, and we're here. It's finally coming together, man. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Dayton Strong Recovery 101. Dayton Strong Recovery is definitely an open platform to anyone and everyone struggling with mental health or addiction issues. It's an open fellowship. Anyone's welcome. We're here to carry the message of recovery, hope, inspiration, to show that recovery is possible, guys. That's what it's all about. Together we're stronger and that we can't do this alone. It's a one day at a time, sometimes for me, one moment at a time. I can remember those days where the Serenity Prayer was my best friend. And I had to say it time and time again just to get me through those moments when I was struggling. But anywho, welcome everybody. Thursday Night Hope. I'm glad everyone is tuning in and can listen. I've got two amazing speakers, easy for me to say, lined up tonight. They're going to share their experience, strength, and hope of how it was prior to recovery and how it is today in recovery. Combined, these gentlemen have 50 years of recovery. There's a lot of knowledge stored up in them noggins of theirs. They've both been a huge impact personally in my recovery since I've got to know these guys. I go to local meetings with them online. Mikee is my sponsor. These guys are amazing. And I love them both, man. I'm proud to say they're my friends, and I'm glad that they're both on here. Not only have they helped me, but they help so many people daily. They're both of service nonstop, day in and day out. They participate in their recovery all the time. Enough of me rambling on. I don't know who won the coin toss, but I'm gonna pick my sponsor, Mikee and let him start it off. Mikee, it's all yours, brother.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. I am Mikee. I'm in recovery from active addiction. And I guess I'll tell a little bit about what it was like before I found recovery and what it's like now. I think I had the addict disease from the get-go. That's what it feels like now. When I was young, I was always looking for a way to get that instant gratification, to get out of the way I felt by looking outside myself. And I was introduced to drugs when I was 12. And the first thing that happened was that I tried it and I liked it and I wanted more. And that pattern continued for a very long time. I had a relatively good childhood, maybe there was a bit of neglect and parents were kind of distanced, but not a lot of trauma. I know a lot of us come into recovery with a lot of that, but I think for me, it was always just a way to fit in with my peers, and I enjoyed the high. I liked being outside of me and feeling that buzz, and I was all in from the get-go. I identified as an addict from the beginning. When some older guys invited me to smoke some weed with them, it made me feel cool, and I couldn't wait to do it again. And, this is beginning, well, I was 12 in 1969. So, growing up through those years, it was like there was a new drug every week coming around, and I tried them all, and I liked them all. And for a while, I had mostly good experiences. Sorry, I got to let my dog in or she'll bark at. I had mostly good experiences, but there was consequences right from the beginning too. School grades went down, went from average to horrible, and started cutting a lot of classes, ditching school altogether, and that didn't make my parents happy. I got arrested the first time when I was 16. That unfortunately became a pattern. I was, estranged from family and friends who weren't into that lifestyle, thought it as something dangerous, illegal. But none of that even slowed me down. I just thought it was part of it, or I blamed it on somebody else. I blamed my parents didn't understand, society didn't understand, the police didn't understand. So I just went on and I was all in. And it was never about moderation. It was never about, using safely or, drinking socially. It was always about he who gets the most hammered wins. That was the mentality. And it was just a constant party, There were some things that feel like were turning points. One, when I was 21, there was a traumatic incident where the girlfriend, kind of my first big love affair, where, we were actually going to try to make a life and live happily ever after. And, we were both using, so it was pretty unmanageable, but still, she was pregnant when we met, and I was, doing my best to be there for her. And when the baby was born, to be a father to that baby, because, her actual father was not in the picture. And at 10 months, the baby died in a tragic way. Well, any way would have been tragic, but suddenly and unexpectedly. And, I think it was the last time I just wept uncontrollably. Something shut off in me that day. We tried to hold it together, and both of us went to what the only thing we knew, which was to use. And from that point on, my using kind of took a different turn. It went from just wanting to party to not wanting to feel ever again. I never wanted to feel that pain, that grief. And I did everything I could to ensure that I didn't have to. And if I stayed high, stayed drunk, whatever it was, whatever the drug was, I could run from it and I could avoid it for a time, but that of course carried forward, and there started being a lot of guilt and shame around not being there for her, not being there for her family or my family or any of that. But I just ran, and every consequence, every situation that I was confronted with, I ran from. I went to jail most of the times because I would get pulled over and then not show up in court, and then there'd be a warrant. So I'd end up doing more time than I would have if I just showed up in court. But I ran from everything, and I just kept running, and it went on for a lot of years. I, don't want to talk too much about what drugs I was using. It was mostly about, whatever you had. My drug of choice was more. And, but the last several years of my using, it was meth and alcohol, and the meth was mostly to allow me to drink more. I had gotten into playing music in bands, and I thought I'd arrived. I thought, well, shit, I finally found my calling. I'm getting paid to party now, and drugs and booze are all around me at all times. So, you can kind of imagine how that went. There was some probably pretty bad music on nights that I was shouldn't have been ever propped up on the stage, but and maybe some pretty good music at times too. But that there was another. I don't want to forget this. There was another kind of turning point where the guilt and the shame just became unbearable. My dad got cancer, and when he was diagnosed, I was barely around. I lived near my parents, but I would barely ever see him. But I remember my dad, calling me over one day and having this talk with me about I was going to need to be the man of the house after he was gone. And in the moment, I said, "Oh yeah, I got this. You got to be there for your mom and for your brother and your sister." And I said I would, but I didn't do any of those things. I couldn't handle the pressure. I couldn't deal with the pain and the fear of losing my dad. And after he died, I was literally in a dope house a block away from where the services were being held, trying to get just the right combination of drugs and alcohol to give me the courage to go across the street and be a part of the service. And I finally managed it, and I showed up looking homeless, which I very nearly was. I'm sure I didn't smell good. I didn't feel, welcome. I don't think I was very welcome. Clearly high. And when the service ended and we headed back to my parents' house, everybody's, gathered, um, hugging and talking about my dad and whatever one does in that situation. And I'm in their bathroom stealing his pain meds, and then, got out of there as quick as I could, and did not um, come around again for, I don't know, many months. Wound up in jail again, and I'm being led out into the courtroom. I'm in shackles. I'm in the orange jumpsuit, and I'm surprised. And I see my mom sitting in the courtroom with a friend. Didn't expect her to be there, and I'm looking at doing 2 to 5, and expecting to go to prison. And I don't know. My public defender said, you're getting offered a deal, and you better jump on this. I don't know what the judge smoked, but you got to take this. And I walked out of there with just my 4th DUI, and was released that night. And I was I was clean while I was in jail. There wasn't a lot of dope available, or at least I didn't know about it. And I tried for a time. I got back with an old girlfriend, and she was, always willing to try to patch me up, dust me off, Um, and I'm telling her, this is it. I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'd promised that 100 times, that it was going to be different. I was going to stop using. And for a little while I did. And I was court ordered to attend some 12-step meetings. And I went grudgingly, didn't want to be there, had to get my paper signed, sat in the back of the room. And as soon as I could get out of there, I did, I'd leave. And, but I saw something, I saw some people that were apparently changing their lives that, by and large were happy or seemed relatively content if they weren't, going through something. And I think, years later when I finally, um, hit the bottom and couldn't do it anymore, I remembered that and I knew where to go for help. For me, that's what, has helped me. And it was about a year and a half after that, my dad dying and that court date, that I stopped using. I went out again after I was, after the nudge from the judge, after I completed the terms of my probation, I was using again ASAP, and it continued. And the day that I stopped, I got really sick. Um, had some kind of infection that started in my throat and ran through my body. And, I remember being propped up on stage and I was so out of it. I was sick, I was drunk, I was high. Somehow got through the gig and then went back to mom's, the only person who, still let me in. And several weeks being in and out of the hospital and, lots of antibiotics and pain meds. So I was abusing the pain meds, but it was, I was nearing the end. And I got to feeling a little better. And the girlfriend at the time, came up to visit me, and she said, why don't we take a ride in town? You've been in this house for weeks, you haven't been out. Let's just take a ride. And I see this look in my mom's eyes, that I'd seen before, but it was just like, she didn't know if she'd see her son again. And it really hit me this time, but I got in the car and away we went. And of course, 10 minutes later, I'm at the dope house. I got my drug of choice sitting in front of me. And then it just hit me. It just was all over me. I knew in that moment I had to stop or I'd die. And I still had some kind of spark of hope. I wanted to live. And I knew where to go for help. I had been exposed to 12-step fellowship and I wanted what those people had. And I said to my friends, and to my girlfriend, you got to get me out of here. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. It's over. And she took me home. And the next day I found a meeting and picked up a white key tag. That was February 15th, 1992. And I have not found it necessary to use since. And so that's how I got to NA. And needless to say, my life has changed drastically. Heard it said that, recovery will give you your life back. Well, I didn't want my life back. Recovery gave me a life, period. And very little, if any, similarities to the life I led before. I was told early on what I needed to do. to stay clean. And I was willing to take those suggestions. I made a lot of meetings. I joined a home group. I found a sponsor. I started working steps. With about 6 months clean, through a long story that isn't relevant, I wound up moving from California, where I had lived all my life, to Tennessee. And so I needed to start over in recovery again, and I was able to do that. I was welcomed, and I got in the middle of the boat. And it needs to be said that my recovery hasn't always been just, well, I've found recovery and now life's great. There's been lots and lots of times that it was really difficult. There's been a lot of times that I became complacent. Life was going pretty well, so I thought, well, I don't, need to go quite so many meetings. I don't need these service commitments. I also dealt with mental health issues, had a lot of anxiety and depression, and I would allow that to pull me away from meetings. At times I was not comfortable in my own skin. I was not comfortable in the meetings, and I would stop going. And I got pretty miserable a number of times. And there was one time in particular, and I remember this because of the way it played out. I hadn't been to a meeting in months, and a sponsee came to my house unannounced, banged on the door, and said, "Your dumbass is going to a meeting. You have 10 years clean today." And I didn't even know it. And he took me to a meeting. I picked up my key tag, and once again got in the middle of the boat. The only thing I've done right is not to pick up no matter what. That's been the one thing that has saved me, that no matter what I've got to go through, I understand that using is only going to make it worse. And I believe that, I've got a relapse in me, but I don't believe I've got another recovery. If I pick up, it's over. It's the end. There's only one way that's going to go. So I choose on a daily basis to not do that, and bringing it up to more recent years, my mental health issues, and it seems like so many of us in recovery struggle with these, is, mental health issues really kicked my ass. I'd been dealing with it off and on. I sought outside help, and what the outside help was doing for me would work for a time until it didn't, and then we'd have to try something else. Long story short, after a few hospitalizations, I wound up being forced to retire. I was unable to work. I had to go on disability. I moved from the city I lived in, from Nashville, to a very small town in rural southern middle Tennessee. And I live in a cabin in the woods, and I went from a very full, busy life with a career. And when I was plugged in, had a lot of service commitments and a lot of social life, and to me and my dog in a cabin with a horrible amount of anxiety and depression and heavy medication. And I literally was on a couch here for about 3 years and did little else. A few people, Mike included, stayed in touch with me, reached out, made sure I was, hanging in there. Did I need anything? Could they do anything? And just having somebody reach out and care meant a great deal to me, and still does. And, I started coming out of that dark place around the beginning of the year, just in time to be in the middle of a pandemic. And, so I was isolated in my head. I was isolated geographically from where I'd been living. I was isolated because of the pandemic, and I found Zoom meetings, and I reconnected with a 12-step program. I reconnected with friends like Mike. I met Joe. I met a lot of other people. I started attending meetings regularly. I got asked to do service at some meetings and doing that, and got a kind of a new sponsor. He actually had sponsored me once before, but I didn't take advantage of it. And I'm a guy that I totally respect his recovery and known for many years. And I'm working the steps, you know. I know this is an open fellowship. Not everybody's a part of a 12-step program, but that's what works for me. I'm actively working the steps with my sponsor. You know, I'm doing the stuff that I was told to do when I first got here. And I'm not confused about if I don't do the things I did when I first got here, I'll do the things I did before I got here. And so, you know, it continues to work for me. And that kind of just brings us up to right now. You know, Joe asked me to come share my story, and such as it is, I hope somebody finds a little bit of hope in that. And the truth of it is, you know, for this time that I'm in this, doing this with Joe and Mike, I'm participating in my recovery. And if nobody gets anything out of it, I stayed clean another hour. You know, sometimes it's selfish. So that's what I do. I participate in my recovery. I make that decision on a daily basis not to use no matter what. And I don't have to do it alone, you know. I can always reach out. There's people who are willing to help me, people who love me until I can learn to love myself again. And I'm just so grateful, you know, that I found this way of life. Grateful to have Mike and Joe in my life, and just glad to be here. Glad to be anywhere. Glad to still be on the right side of the dirt. So, and thank you, folks, whoever's listening, and thank you, Joe, for having me. That's it.
I appreciate it, Mikey. Man, there's too much to relate to. I'm still thinking about when you were talking about being in the county oranges and being all shackled up, because that, man, it just brings back memories, man. You know, it's cool when I hear your story because it's different every time. I learn a little bit more about you every time I hear you share those little tidbits um, that I didn't know about you. You know, I get to hear it every time I hear your story. It's different every time, and it's the mental health struggles, being incarcerated, um, running on self will, the mental health and anxiety and depression and isolation. I gigantically relate to. We've talked about that time and time again. Um, you know, because mental health and addiction hand in hand. Um, you know, and if we don't treat them both, or if I don't treat them both, I know I'm in trouble. And I just love hearing other people share about it. I mean, that's the therapeutic value of one person helping another. It's all relatable no matter if you're in a 12-step program or not. Addiction and mental health hand in hand. I don't care what fellowship you belong to, like I said, or even if you don't belong, you know, if you're in recovery and you're struggling, you said it right at the end, you know, reach out, share, ask for help. Those are all struggles of mine personally because I'm bullheaded and I struggle with control and I know what's best for me. Um, Becoming vulnerable and practicing humility, they're not easy. It's not easy to do, especially when a lot of men are brought up to be strong, you know, and not show that weakness. At least I was personally. Um, and I related to a lot of that, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story. That was awesome. You've been getting a lot of people in here appreciating your insights. I've been trying to pop up some of the some of the comments on here. Welcome everybody, Patty and Marty and Addie, of course, is in here. There's all kinds of people in here listening. I really appreciate you guys coming in and listening tonight and joining us and participating in your recovery. I've got Metal Mike up next. He's also in Tennessee. Another huge part of my recovery. Since I've known him, we've been participating a couple times a week in online meetings, which have saved my butt also, like Mikey said. Um, they've been a blessing. That's one thing I can say I'm thankful for COVID at least, is the Zoom and the online virtual fellowship, the way it's come together and has saved and helped so many people, because it's available 24/7. It's always there. If you're struggling, there's a meeting going on somewhere that you can participate in and reach out and ask for help. Mike, Metal Mike, you are up, brother.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, can you run that intro music for me again? I'm kidding.
You like that?
Yeah, I loved it.
I figured you'd like
It was
that better than
almost
the hip
and it
hop
said
one.
down there, "You're backstage," and I was like, "Man, this feels very familiar." Well, thank you for inviting me, and Mikey, thanks for sharing. Me and Mikey have blazed many trails together in recovery, and this feels like a H&I meeting to me, and we've done a few of those. Mikey and I have gone into jails to carry the message together, treatment centers, different things, and that those are probably that kind of service and the kind of relationships I built through that kind of service since I've been in recovery are probably the things that I cherish the most and that like I get the most out of those connections. You know, I think addiction is a mental disorder. I mean, I think it's listed as one, and I'll take it a couple steps further. But I learned it was mental, physical, and spiritual. I was skeptical about the spiritual part when I got here because I'm a skeptic. I was skeptical about everything, and I would use that as an excuse to act out on my character defects quite a bit. And it took a lot of step work for me to realize that about myself. A lot of step work and a lot of input from a sponsor and other people in recovery helping me to see, where I was falling short and what my character defects were. Um, I started using when I was a kid. I can relate to Mikey's story so much. I grew up in the 60s and 70s too, and he's a little bit older than me, but not that much. I think in 1969 I was 7, so you're like 5 years older than me. But the very first time I got high, older neighborhood kids thought it would be funny to get us younger kids to sniff gas. And we had no idea. I had no idea what was getting ready to happen. And me and my friend Curtis sniffed it. He sniffed some. He started laughing. He goes, "Oh, I feel funny." Then I sniffed some, and I'll never forget the first time that chemical rush hit me. I was probably 9 or 10, maybe. And I was just like, whoa, something changed right then. And, after he was done, he was like laughing and then he was done. And after I was done the first time, I did so much, I literally got sick and threw up. But did I stop? No. What did I do? I got right back on that gas can. And I was tripping. I sniffed so much. So I started on inhalants, went through the gamut. I'm not going to run down the whole drug log, but I started using the ones that are back then, especially were the easy gateway drugs, were like weed and beer, and roll with that. There's my daughter, Veronica. Say hey. That's my girl right here.
You got
We're
the live stream bomber.
Yeah, the stream bomber. Interesting story I'll tell you here in a minute. So yeah, and it was fun. when I first started getting high when I was a kid in my teens, and then started playing music, and it just went hand in hand. And my heroes were like musicians who did drugs, and like Hugh Hefner, who shot Playboy pictures, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was it. It sounds like such a cliche, but that's what I wanted out of life, and I chased that for the next 20 something years. The drug use and being a musician went hand in hand, and also the obsessive compulsive focus on trying to make it in the music business became everything, and I didn't care about anything else except drugs and trying to get a record deal with my brothers, and we chased that to the bitter ends. We finally got one in the 90s. And up until that point, I mean, there have been many incidences where I probably should have been dead from DUIs and crazy nights out and doing too much and near overdosing. But for some reason, I lived through all that. Actually, thought my brothers and I had some kind of charmed life scenario going on. So we got our record deal in 1990, and everything was recorded. The videos were shot, CDs and everything were pressed. And we were a metal band that played a lot of lead guitar and had like high vocals and all that kind of stuff that I still love. And then this little band from Seattle called Nirvana came out with a song called Smells Like Teen Spirit. Poof. Everything.
Damn them.
I know it. I hated him for so long. Them, all that. I love it now, but I'm grateful, because if I would have gotten what I wanted then, I wouldn't be here talking to you tonight. I'm sure that my brothers and I, Paulie, wouldn't have lived through it. So not only did I have to get a real job, but my drug use, what felt like a failure, what felt like my identity, we were so close, and then just having it go away, it left a huge void in me. And I just started filling that void with the drugs, with behaviors, with relationships, just anything but a spiritual connection. And it got really bad. In 2000, New Year's Eve 2000, my brother's girlfriend OD'd and almost died, and it scared him enough that he went to treatment. And through osmosis, or through luck, or through my higher power, or whatever it was, he asked me to come out to the treatment center where he was going and to do the family weekend. And my first thought for that was, okay, how am I going to get through this weekend up in Dixon, Tennessee, without dope? So I had to make sure I had enough dope to get through the weekend. And as I don't know, a lot of people here, or you or Mikey, knows how treatment works. And when you go to the family weekend, there's like an Al-Anon meeting for the family, and then the addicts and alcoholics and bipolar and dual diagnosis, whatever, they're separated. So they stuck me in with the Al-Anons when we got there, and I was immediately like, those people were pissing me off, man. It's like, hey, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I was in the wrong meeting. I just didn't know it. But about a day and a half later, after being exposed to all this, even while I was high, somehow it started sinking in. And all of a sudden, on that Sunday, I had a realization. Most profound realization I think I've ever had in my life. I sat there and I went, wow, I'm a fucking addict. Sounds so simple now, but then it was just like, that was a spiritual awakening to me. And then if I at that point, I had a choice. What was I going to do with that? Stuff it down like I had been for years. I knew I had a problem, but I was never really able to admit. Or was I going to do something different? And just by chance, the next thing that happened to me is I went to a literature rack and picked up an IP called The Triangle of Self Obsession from a 12-step program that I love and has saved my life. And I read that, and tears started just going down my face because it was just like, that was me. Somebody knew who I was and how I felt. So I decided to go to one of those meetings the next day. I also decided I was going to stop using that night. But I woke up that Monday morning with good intentions and used right there, sitting at my desk, looking actually at a computer screen like I am right now. And I'll never forget, like, using, sitting there at the desk and crying because I didn't want to use, but I had to use. I didn't know how to not use. I called the line. I found the meeting. I showed up early and waited to get in. And man, I'm so grateful that I went to that meeting and that I heard the message that I needed to hear. And it was a simple message, but the thing that I remember the most from the first meeting is just the compassion, the love, and the care, the genuine care that people in the rooms had. And I think that goes without saying, whether it's a 12-step program, any kind of group situation where you have people who've been through the same kind of trauma or the same kind of life experience, and they share with each other and they talk about it and they make that connection. We call it the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. There's just so much power in that, and a spiritual connection, and that's what I needed. And there was something in there that I wanted, that I was attracted to, and they told me to just keep coming back. It had been a long time since anybody said that to me. Mostly it was like, man, you got to go. Please leave us alone. So yeah, I was grateful. And I got in the middle of the boat. And what it was for me was becoming involved in a home group, getting a sponsor, starting to do step work. That's the 12-step way. Um, my daughter's in a DBT group, and I've looked at some of their literature for people who suffer with bipolar and other even deeper um, mental stuff. And it's so similar. It's a lot of the same kind of thing. They just approaching it in a way that works better for what she's doing. Because she's come to the other thing that coincided when I got clean in 2000 is when she was 13, she was diagnosed. And I'll never forget, like, I was just fresh in recovery, and then all of a sudden I'm dealing with, this person that I love more than anything, um, dealing with being in a psych hospital and going back and forth and trying different medications and different doctors and not sure, and I'm so glad that I had people that I was meeting in recovery during that time, because a lot of them had been there and done that and were able to guide me and help me and give me their input. And that's one of the other things I'm most grateful about in recovery, is having this wisdom of others to tap into, freely given, no expectations of what am I going to get out of it, just people sharing experience, strength, and hope back and forth. It's life changing, man. It has been for me, because I was never like that before. Back when I was using and chasing record deals, I was the oldest brother. I was the leader of the band. If it was some job we were doing, I was usually like the manager or the boss. Perfect for a control freak like me. Letting go, First time I heard that, I was like, let go of what? It just didn't compute. But I was desperate enough and my ass had been kicked enough by the disease and by the behaviors that I was willing to listen and give it a shot. And it took some time. It took some time to understand letting go and letting God. It took some time to understand that just because somebody triggers me, just because somebody throws that ball, I don't have to catch it. Wow, man, I just had this ego that was just like, had to react to everything. And people in recovery were teaching me, let that shit go, man. It's not that big a deal. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? I was like, I want to be right and be happy. I'll be happy if I'm right. And they're like, just keep coming back. You ain't getting it yet. And the process takes what it takes. Staying clean and not using, I'm not going to say it was easy, but once I got over the hump on that, I could do that. And it helped to go to a meeting every day. It helped to be hanging out with people who were doing the same thing. I was a musician still. I wasn't giving that up, but they said, playgrounds and playmates. So I had to go through a little bit of a learning curve on how to be a musician, how to go into some places like that, and how to stay clean. And one of the best tools for that is another recovering addict. When there's two or more addicts together and you're going into an environment that might be sketchy, your chances are so much better, especially if, you're serious about your recovery, which I was. And luckily, my brother Paulie, who was at that treatment center I went to, he's getting ready to celebrate his 22 coming up in a week. And he's in the Liquid Fellowship. I'm in the other one in Narcotics Anonymous. And we've been able to do this thing together. I'm so grateful for him, man, because there's been many times when it was only him that I had, and it was only me that he had in some of these situations where people are coming up, offering you drinks or offering you drugs. Another thing I learned is I don't have to go into my recovery life story anytime somebody does something like that. They don't give a shit. They just say, no, thanks, man. That's it. In the beginning, it was like, no, man, I just started going to these meetings. I'm trying to do this recovery thing. And they're all like, dude, shut up. Just no. Simple. I was always, and that's left over from my people pleasing and all my survival behaviors that I had before I came to recovery that I had to work through with some step work and with just some life experience by not using and dealing with feelings and stuff as time went on. I don't have to explain myself. No is a complete sentence. These are all these simple little things that I learned in here serve me so well. I mean, I can. If somebody really wants to know and they're really interested, I'm an open book. But I don't have to volunteer all kinds of information up front when no is just a totally acceptable answer. I love that. But I'm so grateful because things started happening once that I was able to stay clean for a few years and get some recovery. It's funny how much um, open area there is in your life when you're not chasing drugs 24/7 and scheming and finding ways and means to get more and just living in that lifestyle. It freed up so much mental space and spiritual space. I was actually able to start really pursuing some stuff and giving it the time and commitment that it deserved. And I was able to get a job with one of my childhood heroes and actually travel the world working with him, at the highest level in the live music thing. That was a great experience. some of the hardest work I've ever done, but that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been clean. I was able to help take care of my grandfather the last year of his life. Actually moved in and lived with him and took care of him right before I left to go on that tour. And man, I got so much gratitude for that. I never would have done anything like that when I was in active addiction. It's like what Mikey was talking about with his dad. I've had a couple of grandparents that I love more than anything that died while I was in active addiction. I showed up at their funeral drunk. You know, I made a scene and just made it it was so unnecessary, the pain and turmoil I caused by being so self-centered. But to be able to learn some stuff and then be able to be there for my family and show up, and like, this was my favorite grandfather. He was a musician too. His name was Jack, and he was a band leader too back in the 50s and 60s, and I loved him more than anything. He was the most generous man I ever met. He wasn't religious or anything. He was just a sweet, loving guy. And I always felt guilty for disappearing out of his life, especially like the last 10 years of my active addiction, because we were super close when I was younger. And then you know how we do, we just ghost people that, family especially, that because of the guilt and shame, and don't want them to see us like that. And, you know, I stole money and stole things from him too, out of my mom's basement, where he was living. And he never said anything about it, but just to be there even when dementia was coming on, and to just do the things that needed to be done to take care of somebody when they're that old and nearing the end of their life. What an experience. And not only do I learn how to say no in here, but I learn how to say yes to the things that I would always avoid in the past. And I've learned commitment, in that horrible D word, discipline. you know, Not 100%, but definitely so much better than it was. And living by those kind of principles has an unexpected payoff. And it's different for everybody, but they work. That's just the bottom line, from the things that I've gotten out of Narcotics Anonymous and doing step work, learning how to apply principles in my life and positive solutions instead of always living in the problem and negative thinking and doom and gloom. Just the switch of that mindset changes so much. It changes the energy in me, then it changes the energy around me, you know. And when I'm connected and it's flowing like that, things go way better. I'm human. We all are. We fall short. I get anxiety. I'll get up in my head. I'll get angry, or my ego will come back in there, and I'll feel like I'm being slighted. And then I'll start trying to control and manage. And that's when shit starts going the other way. So but I had the tools, and one of my favorite steps, probably my favorite step of all the 12 steps, is the 10th step, because it tells me that I'm still human, that I'm going to fall short, but I don't have to live in it forever. It doesn't have to be like it was, where it goes days, weeks, or months with resentment and regret and anger building up. I can clean that shit up. I can own my stuff. And that was one of the things I was never ever able to do before. I was always hiding, trying to shift blame, not wanting to own, not wanting to be seen as making a mistake or be wrong. Guess what? People make mistakes. You know, I've learned so much of respect for other people when they can admit their shit and own their stuff, and being able to do that. That's another thing that's helped me build relationships in the rooms and in recovery, and then outside the rooms at work, and with other musicians. Those principles work in every aspect of my life. But for me, it all started with not using and opening up my ears and listening and being willing, to take the suggestions and move forward. You know, I look back on my early recovery, a lot of the suggestions I was given, I didn't take because I just wasn't ready and couldn't. And there were results from that. I haven't worked a perfect program by any means. One of my major downfalls has been codependency in relationships. I've got the X's to prove it. I've had to start over a few times, from nothing. And because that's what I would do instead of just burning everything down, just like, you just keep everything. I'm just going to leave. Okay. Just let me take my guitars and my amps and my shitty car. Finally got a good car. Took a long time. But I don't know, man. Thanks for asking us to do this. I hope there was something in there. I just know, like Mikey said, anytime somebody asks me to do some service, I'm going to do it. And the main reason that I do it is because I get to stay clean and I get another day, of participating in my recovery. And recovery is, it's not just one thing. It's a combination of these things. And being of service and carrying the message and giving back is that's where my spirituality kind of lives, because I still struggle with that. I still struggle with the spiritual part of the program and the higher power and what does it all mean. And it's really easy to get out there on that kind of stuff. So I just try to keep it simple, as long as there's some love in there and some compassion, some generosity, some honesty, that all works for me. So it's getting close. I mean, to talk so
Keep it
long.
simple, stupid, right? Throw a little
Yes.
kiss in there, little kiss plug.
Or this girl told me, is like, if you're having problems with negative self-talk, you can call it "keep it simple, sweetheart," talking to yourself.
There you go. Yeah, we'll try to keep that positive mindset.
I never could look in the mirror and go, "I love you." I never was good at that one.
Hey,
thanks, you guys.
I appreciate you sharing. It's funny because you just said that, and I was just thinking about the positive affirmations that Addie, because I struggle with it. We both struggle with positive affirmations and telling ourselves nice things, and like we have them on post-it notes in our bathroom. So it's like literally one of the first things that we see when we get up to go to the bathroom. It's, I'm wiping my eyes, doing my thing, and there's these I love yous and you're wonderfuls and you're worth it. But the more you say it and the more you see it, the more it sticks and the more I start to believe it. And it really, really, really does help. But I appreciate you sharing again, your story. I've heard it a few times, and you talking about the gas right at the beginning. And I can remember when I was in early childhood experiencing inhalants and things like that, that I honestly had forgotten about until you brought that up. So it got me thinking. But, things from being or getting high in meetings, guilty. Been there and done that many times because I just simply wasn't ready, and I was filling those voids that you talked about. I was just out of control. I couldn't feel the feels because feelings suck, and it was just easier to put my drug of choice and not feel. It was easier to hide and mask that pain. And the one that really got me is when you started talking about the funerals, because I just lost my father a little over a year ago, and I was so high the day of his funeral I didn't go. I never got to see my dad, and those are things that I still I still haven't completely forgiven myself about, if I have to be honest about it, because I really haven't. I haven't quit pumping quarters in that ass kicking machine on that one yet. Because I still beat myself up a little bit, but I found that the more I'm honest about it and I talk about it, the easier it gets. Because my family, especially, were some of those people you talked about ghosting, to the point where it wasn't a day at a time. It wasn't a week. It wasn't a month. It was years. And they were looking in obituaries to see if I was still alive. And, it's just all relatable things. Um, just relating to what people say, those keep coming backs and those little things we hear in those meetings when we're first going in there and we're getting those awkward hugs and hearing those little things that, for me personally at the beginning, I thought were bullshit and I didn't like and didn't understand them. And I'm like, yeah, these people are nuts. And they all make sense now, and I hold them near and dear to my heart and I'm extremely grateful for them. But I remember that. And I'm so grateful for whoever it was or the people that were in those rooms that planted that seed. That was the important part. They were practicing step 12 and they planted that seed. And the God of my understanding, for whatever reason, kept bringing me back. And I kept coming back and I finally got it. And, that's the beauty of whatever program you work is, that therapeutic value and seeing people finally get it and seeing that smile and that glimmer and that hope. It's that hope for the hopeless. I want to bring up a comment here real quick before I close things out that I thought was pretty meaningful comment that Marty had shared, thanking both of you guys for sharing your stories and being open and vulnerable. You both given me a glimmer of hope. Said he needs to be open and vulnerable to talk to someone about what's going on, feelings, not keeping them in anymore. And that's so true. Because I was that guy myself, and I think all three of us relate to that. Um, because I had become the master of isolation myself. Um, I would lock myself in my room, or if I was homeless living on the streets, wherever I was at that point in time, I was a loner. I wanted to be by myself. I wanted to be high, and I didn't want to feel anything, and I didn't want to talk to anyone either. And I just totally relate to that. And the key to that is for me, was to be honest and share and become vulnerable, like you said, open minded and willing to share those deep core issues. There's someone in here. I'm not going to call him out. That's watching right now. That was a counselor of mine here locally in Dayton, and if he's still listening, he knows exactly who I'm talking about. Uh, I love this man to death. He was a counselor of mine, and these are things that this man taught me that finally have stuck, and I've really started to hold near and dear to my heart and understand them. It's absolutely amazing, um, how honest and how true these things have been told to me that I'm finally starting to get. Here's another one here. Thanks for sharing tonight. There we go. 157 days clean today, guys. That's awesome. Clean and sober. My boyfriend relapsed in alcohol this evening. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm staying strong and praying the pain he's going through, he'll hand it over to God. That's it. One thing I've learned in my personal recovery, I have to keep myself first. I don't keep my recovery number one, and me number one, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose it all. It's that old saying, and I know NA's literature at least, it says you can't save your face and your ass at the same time. And, I've learned the hard way that I have to keep myself first and keep my recovery and me number one. Because again, control. I can't control other people. I can't control their thoughts, their feelings, their actions. I just can't do it. I have to look out for me. I really do. Here we go. We'll throw up one more comment. And Patty, I loved your shares. I'm sorry I missed some of the second mic, but we did learn very much needed tonight. It's been one hell of a day. You're right. I'm tired. I know these guys are tired. We've all had a long day, guys. I want to thank both of you really for coming on tonight and being here. It's getting late for everybody. I know we've all had busy days, except for Mikey, my sponsor. He's retired. He got to sit home all day. You bum. But me and Metal Mike, we worked today. But I
Get
can't.
Mikey out tomorrow.
Your sponsorship dues just came due.
Man, well,
You
thank
didn't
God
fill one
thank
out.
God thank God I just got paid. I'll be able to afford them because they keep going up for some reason. I must be doing something wrong. I'm gonna have to contact World Services about this. I think something's going
No,
on here.
you just trust us, man. You'll be fine.
Trust and faith. Well, remember, guys, give yourself a break. I'm super hard on myself. For me, surrendering and just having trust and faith in something greater than myself and getting out of my own way has helped me tremendously in my recovery. Um, just letting go, letting go and letting that higher power guide me. But the key for me was the application part, was putting in the work and reminding myself that those dues are due daily. It's not just when I feel like it. It's I have to do this daily and stay vigilant in my recovery. Not only do I have to show up for myself daily, day in and day out, in order to show up and help other people and be of service. I have to remind myself daily, guys, to slow down and not overwhelm myself because I've learned that when I put too much on my plate, I get overwhelmed really quick, and those are red flags for me. And just to be honest and share. I can't stress that enough. Everyone on here tonight, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you guys taking the time out to listen to these gentlemen. They're near and dear to my heart. You're all loved. You are all wanted. You are all needed. Please participate in your recovery daily. And if you're struggling, I can't stress this enough. Please reach out. Use the recovery tools in your toolbox and ask for help. Give yourself a break, guys. I love each and every one of you. I'm not for sure when I'll be able to go live again, hopefully tomorrow, depending on my schedule. But I'll definitely be here before the weekend's up. I love you guys. Thanks for participating in all of our recoveries, including your own. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys. Love you guys. Thanks, Mikey.
Thanks, Joe.
Later. Love you.
Thank
Later. Good night, guys.
See you later.